Hi, my name's John Coyle. I've been facilitating some talks in Alabama about potentially merging the Mobile Association with the Baldwin Realtors. And there's been a lot of misinformation and questions, and it's good to have questions. I think that it's great that both sides of the Bay are doing a survey of the membership. But Mobile asked me if I would give you a brief cut down version of what I did both at the Five Rivers Task Force back in February and then also in Robertsdale in June with the combined merged both boards of directors. So I'm going to run through the PowerPoint. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen here. And you should be seeing my PowerPoint. So let me start off and say when we got together in, this is basically a reprise of the meeting in June. So it was the full boards of directors of both associations. It was also the Five Rivers Task Force, which is an overlap because there are probably 2/3 of the people on the Five Rivers Task Force are from the boards of directors, but there's a few others. So at any rate, what we first did was, of course, talk about COVID-19. We were all meeting in person on June 23rd. And so we talked about staying socially distant. You don't need any more of that. We talked about confidentiality and antitrust. I have taken some of the most sensitive confidential information out of here, but you definitely can talk to your association executives if you have questions about what that might contain. But it's mostly financials. I'm going to give you, Mobile's asked me to give you a kind of the Cliff Notes version, an unclassified version. Also, antitrust, there we talked about things that we couldn't talk about and why we couldn't talk about them. But let me just keep moving forward with the presentation here. So we started with introductions, name, company, association, and then asked why people were there. We went through goals for a successful meeting, a case study of Bright MLS. I'm the chairman of the board of Bright MLS and have been for over 3 years. And 3 years before that, chair of MRIS, which was one of the largest MLSs in the country that merged to form Bright. So they were thought it would be helpful for both boards to hear the Bright MLS story, and that's what I'm going to share with you today too. Self-evaluations, there are 2 guides on how to merge associations and MLSs, and they start by doing a self-evaluation to see if you're compatible, if you're close enough in culture and alignment that it makes sense. So I'm going to go through that today. A market assessment to see what opportunities are there that would be benefited by merging. Transaction options, there are actually 5 transaction options that both your boards fully considered. Ownership, who would end up owning things, how would it be governed, how would the board be picked, who would be on the board, etc. What about the revenue? How's the money look at the end of the day? We'll talk about the why we should do this, the why not to do it, and then just talk it out and see what you want to do and then go from there to the next steps. So I always like when I'm talking about mergers to start by using this picture of Mount Everest. And what I use as an example is that before we even start talking about a merger, let's all jump in the helicopter, let's fly up to the top of the mountain and take a look and see if we like the view. If we like the view, then maybe we'll keep going. But if we get up there in the helicopter and look out the view and we don't see it any benefit to doing that, then we don't need to go back to the bottom of the mountain and start climbing. But if we do like it, then we have to go to the bottom, we have to start climbing, and it's a slow, laborious process. So really the entire meeting on the 23rd of June was to fly to the top of the mountain, take a look and see if we liked what we saw. So we're going to go through it now. Okay, so the National Association of Realtors, I wanted to lay a little background of what's going on in the world for both of your boards. So in 2014, you may have heard that NAR developed core standards for local associations. They required associations to do a minimum amount of activity to even exist. I will tell you that you do not have to worry, neither of your associations were anywhere impacted by core standards because you were already doing all of that and more. It's sort of things like, do you have a government affairs director and are you lobbying for local issues that are important to realtors? Do you have training? Do you have communications? Really somewhat basic stuff. You guys are well beyond that standard. But basically, they were trying to raise the bar on professionalism and service levels for the membership, for realtors, for agents, and local brokers from the local associations. So what the core standards did was it led to a merger of a lot of smaller associations. There are associations with literally just a couple dozen members, and that really didn't make any sense. They were just ridiculous. So those all merged, and in this year, there is a work group that's developing MLS minimum standards. I'm actually co-chair of that work group for the National Association of Realtors. I'm also vice chair in 2020 of the MLS policy committee at NAR, the national committee, and next year I'll be the chair of that committee. And that's one of the reasons why I got asked to come down and help you guys, because I'm pretty involved in MLS issues, and I was known to both your association executives, and I met with your leadership a year ago before they invited me to come down to Alabama. I should say, and it's no surprise to anybody, that I work for Home Services of America. Home Services owns Roberts Brothers, and I actually had business to come down and work with Daniel Dennis on some internal issues, and so the associations didn't even pay any expense for me to come down. I just came on down on my own. They did pay part of my airfare the second time I came, but the first time I'm a volunteer, just like the rest of your board and whatever. So at any rate, we're working at NAR on this MLS minimum standards, but you guys are not subject to that. But because NAR really is encouraging people to talk about merging, they have grants that they're giving out this year for talks in the last half of 2020. So those grants have already been applied for by Stephanie White, CEO of Mobile. So applied for money to help pay for the facilitator. Not me as a facilitator, but the legal facilitator, a lawyer by the name of Mitch Skinner, who's very prominent in the MLS space, and he's going to draft the documents if we get that far. I thought this graph was interesting, the trends. The number of MLSs have declined from a little over 1,400 to about 1,100 in the last decade. The number of local associations has dropped from, I'm sorry, that's the number of associations has dropped from 1,400 to 1,150. The number of MLSs has declined from 1,000 to now 600, and it's heading lower. The MLS landscape is, the reason why is the cost of technology are going up. To remain competitive with large portals and other entrants takes scale. They have tools that an MLS doesn't have. You probably just heard recently that Realtor.com is now putting out on their website flood maps for every property in America. And that's something that that the portals have the bandwidth to do, and the local MLSs have to up their game, because otherwise people end up just going to Zillow or Realtor.com or somewhere else to get their information instead of going to the MLS, which does not keep realtors, local realtors, at the center of the conversation. If your consumer, your clients can go and get more information from somewhere else and talking to you, that's not a good place to be. So mergers are accelerating. And if we want to control our future, we should probably explore at least what that would look like. This is a map, and you can see the size of the dot is the size of the MLS. And just to zoom in on southern Alabama, you can see right there on both sides of the bay are dots for Mobile and for Baldwin. If we merge those two together, if you merge those two together, you'll be pretty close to the large Birmingham dot up in the middle. You still have Atlanta and Houston and places in Florida that are bigger. You don't have to be bigger, but there's some benefit to being bigger. So let me give you a case study and talk about Bright briefly. So let's start with what is an MLS. So an MLS creates an orderly marketplace for listing and selling real estate. It's based on cooperation and compensation. Now this is a kind of a funny one. We are really the only industry in America that where competitors agree to work together and cooperate and share compensation. You know, I just bought a car recently, and the local dealer did not have the car that I wanted, but I could see it about 40 miles away at another dealer in their inventory. It was a new car. You would think those dealers would cooperate and share and give their cars back and forth, and they did not. They didn't. I had to drive across state lines, across 2 state lines to get to the other dealer to buy the car because they don't cooperate. But here, I get a listing, you're free to sell my listing. And I agree in writing in the MLS to share the compensation if you do sell that. So that cooperation and compensation is an amazing thing. And by the way, I always thought that the cooperation and compensation was because I was a realtor. I'm wearing the R. They should share with me because I'm a realtor. It does not reside with your realtor membership. It resides in the MLS. And so that's another reason why it makes sense to potentially to put MLSs together. So anyway, there's a structure of rules, compliance standards, and arbitration. Arbitration is arguably one of the single best benefits of being a realtor. If you don't have arbitration and you sell something and you're procuring cause, but they won't pay you, what do? You sue. If you've ever sued for commission, you'll know how horribly expensive it is. I got stiffed. I'm a broker in Maryland. I had 250 agents in 7 offices, and one of my agents got stiffed by a buyer client, and it was $25,000 commission, and it was so egregious what they did. I said, absolutely, we're going to sue to get that money. And we sued, and it cost us $33,000, and we won in the end. We got the 25 grand. So arbitration that the Realtors Association does for us, it's a panel of our peers who know the rules that we all abide by. It's fast, and they make a quick determination, and it saves us so much money. We don't have to hire lawyers. We don't have to go to court, whatever. So anyway, I just want to remind you that somebody asked, why should we even bother being a realtor? And I say that's one of the main reasons. Another main reason, of course, is the code of ethics. The third one is the lobbying that the Realtor Association does. But let me just move on and keep going. So why did we want to do Bright MLS? Well, we really felt that the consumer has incredible access to data, and in some cases more data than we do as agents. And so we wanted to solve that. Agents have boundaries, but the consumer doesn't. You know, we have consumers now. They can go get access to all the data's out there, all the information. They can go see all the active listings all over the country, and yet we can't necessarily even see right across the bay because we're not in that MLS. And so we have very restricted boundaries that the consumers don't have. So it seemed like for Bright, we ultimately, well, I'll show you what we put together. We had 2 large MLSs, MRIS in the DC, Baltimore market, and Trend in Philadelphia. And they both wanted to grow, and we just weren't getting anywhere in trying to do that. And what we learned is that people will join together as a team, but they won't surrender to a victor. And that was really a key moment for us at Bright to understand that, because frankly, MRIS was arguably the richest MLS in the country. We had $34 million in cash and another $20 million in assets. And we thought we could just buy people. Well, people didn't want to be bought. It doesn't work. We had to come together as a team. And the reason why we wanted to do it, it was really time to innovate the MLS model. Zillow, Amazon, Facebook, they're doing a lot of innovation, but it's not coming out of the MLS industry. And why not? There's really only 3 major MLS vendors out there, and that would be Paragon, Matrix, and Flex. And it really takes size and scale and commitment to innovate. And we just didn't have that until we merged Bright. So what we did at Bright was we took a view of the eastern seaboard from the International Space Station, and we just drew a line around wherever the light was on the inside, and there weren't any barriers for us expanding. We drew this line, and then we invited all of those people at all those different MLSs to come to a meeting and talk about what we maybe could do together. And we ultimately said we had three goals. We wanted to be an MLS simplified. We wanted to reduce duplication. A larger group of subscribers would have one set of rules, one fee, one system, one process, and just be simpler. You enter the listing one time, you don't have to enter it multiple times. We wanted greater innovation at Bright. We wanted to pioneer imaginative and relevant solutions, position ourselves for the future, and we wanted more information. We wanted more information for our agents so that they would be the smartest one in the transaction. We didn't want to have our agents continue to have buyers and sellers know more about their property and market and nearby markets than we knew. So some lessons we learned. We had to lose our swagger. At Bright, we really thought we were the bee's knees. We were at one point the largest MLS in the country. And so we walked with a swagger. And it's good to be proud of what you are, but it's also good to recognize when maybe you were swaggering a little too much. One of the mistakes we made was you got to plan for who moved my cheese concern. Some people don't want their cheese moved no matter what, even if it's old and stale cheese, they don't want it moved. We had a real issue because we merged three different front ends. Those three front ends that I mentioned, we had all of those, and we had 9 different databases. And frankly, when we smushed it all together, that was a mess. You don't have to worry about that. You're only talking about 2 databases, and you do have to transition from one front end to the other. We didn't look long and hard at our regional rules and changes and things that seemed like, how do you count days on market and whatever. We needed to spend a little more time. At Bright, we didn't. We glossed over that, and it came back and bit us a little bit. So when I met with your 2 boards, we started with the self-evaluation. And so the bottom line is you have about 2,300 people at Baldwin, you have about 1,400 at Mobile combined, almost 3,800 members. That's in Realtor members in the Realtor Association. In the MLS, the numbers are all a little bit bigger. You've got some crossover from nearby markets. So just under 2,500 for Mobile and for Baldwin, and 1,750 for Mobile. Combined, a little over 4,000, almost 4,100 MLS subscribers. The other self-evaluation factors we looked at is your MLS structure. Both your associations are nonprofits. Your MLSs are both C Corps, which is great, makes things easy. Black Knight, Paragon at Baldwin, CoreLogic Matrix at Mobile. You both are on RPR. HomeSnap, which is the national broker public portal. You are participating in Baldwin and are working on it in Mobile, but hadn't signed up yet. And then you're both using Showing Time for a showing system. So those are really great. A lot of alignment there on what you provide, with the one exception, the MLS system. In terms of staff, these numbers are a little bit misleading in that it implies that there's only 2 staff for the MLS, when in fact there's 2 people who are full-time dedicated to the MLS, and the other staff includes people, whether it's in finance or even the CEO, who are allocated a little bit to one or the other. So there's a lot of allocation. But the bottom line is, you can see you have 19 people total. It's actually 18 now because one at Mobile left. That is normal to get about 10% attrition a year in any large group of employees. So we don't have an issue there. If everybody is needed going forward, there's going to be plenty of work to do. So no issues there. Financial due diligence, I'm not sharing all the financials with you because that's not my right to do that, but I can share you the high level, and that is both Baldwin and Mobile are profitable. They're making money in their association and MLS combined. They're both financially stable. They both have assets in direct proportion to their membership. One is not more affluent than the other. If one's bringing 40% of the members to the merger, they're also bringing 40% of the assets and the revenue and everything else. So they're both well-run, fine organizations. You should be proud of your association and your MLS. Both own their buildings. Both have adequate cash reserves to fund the merger and no financial reason not to merge if you want to merge. So there's no financial reason you shouldn't do it. There may be other reasons, but no financial. So I just wanted to get that out there. So when you talk merger, one of the things you want to do is remove pain points because people hate pain points. So one pain point is, you may have your favorite person who's always on the other end of the phone when you have an MLS question, and you may, as an agent, say, I don't want them to lose their job. Well, I'm just going to tell you, all existing staff, all programs, all facilities, initially they'll be here. Now, will they be here forever? No, people will retire. People will go and get a better job somewhere else. People will change roles at the association. As a board, you may make a decision that we need to downsize one facility or upsize another. I mean, frankly, we're in the middle of COVID and who knows what kind of space we'll need later, but that isn't a reason to wait to not do something if you want to do it now. These are going to be viable organizations that'll continue moving forward and doing stuff. But initially, no pain points. We're keeping all the staff, we're keeping all the programs, we're keeping all the facilities. So the MLS system, there were two choices here, and I'm just going to leap ahead. And the two choices were, one is to keep front end of choice. So when you would log in, you would be able to say, I want to go in the Paragon door, or you'd say, I want to go in the Matrix door. It would be the same database in the back, and you would just access it through your own front end. There was a strong request that we should go to Paragon, and the reason being neighboring associations, MLSs, are already on Paragon, and so this might accelerate future expansion, and that Pensacola, for example, might say, hey, we're on Paragon too, why don't we just come over and join? Why don't we merge? So that was a long discussion, but at any rate, it appears that Paragon would be the way we would go. So the question on finances, because you look at the pot of money and you say, wow, look at, we've got millions of dollars. Well, you both have millions of dollars. As I said, they're scaled to the number of members. But you can't like say, you know what, let's take a bunch of that and give it back to the members. I'm afraid your charters don't allow that. What your charter says is that if you're going to merge with another association, then that's fine. Everybody goes, it's like poker. Everybody goes all in. However many chips you have, they come into the middle and they're still yours. Nothing goes away. If you don't want to do that, if you wanted to dissolve one or the other or partially dissolve, you only have two choices on where the money can go. One is it can go to a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, and at the discretion of the board of directors, or the other one is it can go to the Alabama Association of Realtors. But those are crazy. You shouldn't do that. You should merge. You're going to need all your assets together as a group as you go forward. So the bottom line is, it's sort of like belonging to a country club. You know, you have to pay to get into the country club. You get to use it as long as you're a member and while you're alive. But when you're gone, there's going to be another generation who's going to own that country club and enjoy that country club. Your association's been around for decades. In the case of Mobile, over 100 years, Baldwin just a little bit less than that. The bottom line is the guy who started it 107 years ago can't say, okay, if you're out, give me my money back. You know, so don't wrap your brain around where that money goes. It's a merger. Everybody goes in, you put your money in, and it's frankly, it's for the benefit of all of us, all of the people who are listing and selling real estate. When I say us, I'm sorry, I'm using your terms. I am not an agent in Alabama. I am licensed in the state of Maryland. But you guys, it's your money, and you should use it for the betterment of your industry down there. Okay. Other considerations that the board's considered. There's $349,000 approximately in crossover dues and subscriptions that will not be paid if you are one MLS and one association. So that will save $350,000 of agent and broker money if you don't have crossover dues and subscriptions. Some people say, well, if we're not getting $350,000, will there still be enough to operate? And I'm telling you, there will be. There are no, and I'm not saying that willy-nilly without research. We've done that. We pulled audited or IRS tax returns. We did a merged P&L. It is not a budget. It is not a detailed dive in that, but it's a high level dive enough to say, is there enough money coming in and balancing the expenses going out that this will work? And the answer is yes. There are no economies of scale built into the model yet. Like I said, we've got all that staff. We're 18 people. We're not driving it down to 15, and staff don't, if you're watching this, don't freak out. That's not like a secret plan or something. There are no economies of scale, but there will be. One of the economies of scale is when we go to showing time, when we go to Paragon, they charge less per member when there's more members. They have one account that has 3,700 members. They're going to charge it less than two accounts that have roughly half that. So, and I can say that given sound management and financials and the financial stability of both your organizations, there is no reason in the foreseeable future where dues and fees would need to go up. Now, will they never go up? If we could have 10% inflation, and then things would obviously go up. But there's no need for you to fear that they are going to go up. There's no plan to do that. And frankly, a good manager, as you all know, can always figure out how to cut a few percent here and there, and there's plenty of money. So don't worry about that. So currently, agent fees, and these are just the agent fees because there's a lot of different fees. Brokers pay a different set of fees, non-members pay a different set. But for the average agent who is a member of the MLS and the association at Baldwin, you pay $399 for MLS, and $170 is your portion of the local association dues. You also have to pay state and national, so you pay a bigger number at $600 and whatever dollars, but $170 is local. At Mobile, they charge $33 more for the MLS and $20 less for the association, so they're at $582. The bottom line was it was decided to, in talks, both by your full boards and the task force, to go with, you can see, $399 for MLS and $170 for local association, which is a blended $569, which is equal to what Baldwin Realtors agents were paying, and all of $13 less than what Mobile was paying. Okay, once we got those facts out and we talked about them, kicked them around, spent a lot of time, we then started talking transaction options. And the first option is don't do anything. Maintain status quo. Keep Baldwin running their MLS, keep Mobile running their MLS, and just part friends. We had a nice time together. Option two is called a data share. So it's the status quo. We still keep Baldwin and Mobile separate, but we share data between the two. So what's the benefits? So the benefits are both users keep their existing system. If you're used to Matrix, you log in on Matrix. If you're used to Paragon, you log in on Paragon. You just get to see all of the listings from the other side. It's much quicker to implement than a merger. Frankly, it's probably 4 weeks and a contract with both CoreLogic and Black Knight to implement it. They've done it countless times all over the country. But there are some pitfalls. And so the first pitfall is it's a lot harder to do when you're using different systems. If Baldwin wanted to merge with Pensacola, both using Paragon, it's just a flipping a switch at Black Knight. But when we have the two different companies, it's a little harder to implement. The rule of thumb is it is not considered to be a good option if you have more than 15 to 20% overlap. That's overlapping market disorder, where you've got members in one and members in another, and we have quite a few, and so it's really not considered the best option. The best is to go forward with a merger. The other reason for that is that your expenses go up because Black Knight and CoreLogic don't give each other their own data for free. They're going to charge. They're going to have to map it, normalize it. It's a process, and so they charge for it. At the same time, your revenue goes down. There would still be that $350,000 savings to your agent because they would drop out of the other one because they would be able to get the data, and so that's a challenge. And it's less efficient. You have no bulk purchasing power. It's still going to be that both sides just keep writing their own checks and can't get any leverage for that. And your staff is going to have to train on and support two systems, your MLS staff and association staff. So they're going to have to train on and know both systems, because they don't know when they get a phone call if it's going to be about one system or another. So it's all a challenge. It's not great. Option number 3 is you merge your MLSs and you co-own it by Baldwin and Mobile. So the associations would stay separate and they would merge their MLS and own shares in the MLS. So there's 3 components to ownership of a joint venture like this. One is stock certificates. So that's the ownership. How much does each own? And how do we figure that out? Number 2 is control, governance. How many seats on the board does each get? And how do we control the MLS that's also partially owned by somebody else? And you can't just say, well, we're the bigger association, so whatever we say goes. Any lawyer will start to tell you that there's all kinds of minority shareholder lawsuits if the bigger the person who owns more shares starts to wield that weight. So you really have, there's a lot of governance is an issue. And then the third one is revenue. So how do you divide up the revenue, the dividends, and who gets what and how? So let's talk about that. So we really only have to spend a lot of time on this if this is the way we're going to go. And so I will just tell you that at Robertsdale, when both boards were there, we went through this. We went through it detailed, but we didn't linger too long. First question is, how do you apportion the shares? And who gets how many shares is important, because you can only divide up the profits based on shareholders. And so the dividends have to be based on the share price percentage. And so the investment, how much money you put in, depends on the share percentage. And so anyway, you can offer shares. You could offer 50-50, even though you're going to have fewer members coming from one or another. But it just gets complicated. And so other things to consider is the new MLS needs a board of directors, need to decide on the size of the board, need to decide who gets how many seats, need to hire a new CEO because it's a separate corporation. It's a separate joint venture. It is not part of either association. It's a separate. So you're now going to go from having 2 CEOs to 3 CEOs. So that's another potential drain on cash that could be used for other things that would benefit agents. So we talked a bunch about the revenue. I'm just going to go through this really fast. These are about right. Baldwin's bringing about 61% of the members, and Mobile about 39% of the members. So if there was $1 million, Baldwin would kick in 600 and 400 for Mobile. They both have that. Anyway, I'm just going to move off this because we ended up with option 4 and number 5. So option 4 is, let's merge the association and let's merge the MLS. Option 5 is the same, but allowing for future expansion of your merged MLS. I will tell you that there are 43 different associations who are shareholders in Bright MLS. They all have their own separate association, 43 of them, but they come together as shareholders and own the MLS. In your scenario, you would only have one association and one MLS. However, it could be that Pensacola's MLS decides that they want to be a part owner of your new merged MLS. It could be Pascagoula, Mississippi. They could want to join in. And this is one of the reasons why option 5 makes sense. It happens in a few places in the world, but it's very, very rare that a local association crosses state lines. And the reason is the National Association of Realtors, the state association, and the local association is kind of a 3-legged stool, and it always flows downhill. And so when you raise money for RPAC at the local, some of it goes to the state and some of it goes to the national. So if you all of a sudden now have 2 states that your local association is part of, it just creates problems. And that's why you don't see, there's maybe 4 or 5 in the country, and I don't see, it's certainly not growing. Bright covers 7 states in the District of Columbia, but all of our associations are all in one state only, because then they are in allegiance with their state association. So at any rate, option 5 allows you to have two separate CEOs. One's running the association and one's running your merged MLS. And it also basically unencumbers the MLS to be able to try and expand over into Florida, over into Mississippi, and further up into Alabama. So you can become the best MLS in the Gulf Coast and then attract other people to join. So we spent a lot of time talking about these transaction options, and we really ultimately came up with 3 of the 5. Option 4, merge everything. Option 5, merge everything into 2 with 2 separate CEOs. And option 1, maintain the status quo. Just back up and, you know what, we had a nice time together, but let's move on. So we talked a lot about the whys, the why nots, the non-negotiables, and next steps from here. And so we landed on a deeper dive into 4 versus 5. And the alternative is basically 5 is a separate MLS corporation, and 4 is the MLS is a committee of the association. There's a question then on what is the board of the MLS, what is the power that they have, and how do you limit that? And is it a separate CEO of the MLS, or is it a VP of MLS operations reporting to the association CEO? The challenge is that an MLS is basically a small technology company with business governance and business type planning, whereas an association is really a political lobbying group with a ladder of leadership that comes in and moves up very rapidly 1 year at each spot, and then they're gone. An MLS it takes more than a year just to get up to speed on all the technology and everything that's going on. And so it's really a different way of governing it. And so we talked a lot about that. And we talked about that with option 5, we would have the ability to sell shares in the MLS to other realtor associations in the future, which could be beneficial for all the members. And we talked about the size of the boards and how we do governance. So one of the things that if you have a separate corporation, and that is the MLS, is that you want to have some limitations on what that board can do, but at the same time, you want to give them the flexibility to be nimble and make the right decisions. So it can't dissolve the corporation without shareholder approval, can't merge into another MLS without the approval, can't you set up a table of authority that says you can spend this amount of money without getting approval, but you can't go willy-nilly and go crazy, and limit them on signing contracts and unbudgeted sums, can't hire people for more than X dollars a year without approval. And then there would be an annual budget that would be approved by the MLS board, but then sent to the shareholders. So the shareholders could then review that budget, and if they didn't like it, they could fire the board. They could do all kinds of things. There was a big discussion about names, and the MLS, Gulf Coast MLS seemed like a really good name, and everybody was in favor of that. The name for a merged association is a little bit of an unusual one. So the National Association of Realtors controls that, and local associations can object. So if you wanted to change your name to the best realtor association in the state of Alabama, you would probably get everybody else objecting, and that would not be an approvable name. So it's a minor issue, but that would be something decided later. As far as legal, there will be a number of documents for the merger. So there are 3 lawyers involved. The 3 lawyers involved are one person to draft the documents, and that is a group representation. So they're not actually working for either association, but they are an expert in these kind of documents, and they'll streamline the process because they're not lobbying for one position or another. They're representing both of you equally and doing things fairly. They're also an expert in these kind of documents. Once they prepare the documents, Then Baldwin has your own lawyer. Great guy, Brad Hicks, talk with him. Mobile has their own lawyer, and both of those two lawyers represent your association and will go in and look at everything prepared by this third lawyer. Larson Skinner is the law firm. Mitch Skinner himself is the lawyer who would prepare the memorandum of understanding and all the legal documents. So at any rate, the bottom line is you're totally represented by a lawyer. You're not represented by me. I'm just a facilitator. I'm just trying to get conversations going. I don't get to vote. Whatever you guys decide is what happens, and that's what's been happening. And Mitch Skinner doesn't get the vote either. He's just trying to make sure you're aware of best practices and pull documents together. And as he puts it together, then your lawyers will ultimately review. So once we have our ducks in a row, there will be a joint board meeting, and it started with, when I say today, I'm speaking June 23rd. We had a joint board meeting. We reviewed and discussed all of these thoughts that you've just heard. And then what happened was both Mobile and Baldwin boards voted to set everything in motion. I will tell you there were two votes. The first vote was whether to do 4 or 5. And that was a unanimous decision by Mobile to go with 5. On the Baldwin side, they had some objection to it. They were really liking the idea of having one CEO for the first 2 years to try and put it all together. And so they voted, 8 people voted for 4, 9 voted for 5. So the bottom line was 5 did pass. And then there was a subsequent vote, and it was a unanimous decision by both boards of directors to move forward. And that was their first vote, but it's not their only vote. So we were there, and there's the finish line. We still have a long way to go, and we're far from there. So 2 new boards with different objectives. So we have to figure out how many people are on there. What's the governance? How long, who are the officers? Do we have local representation in different parts of our service area? What do the budgets look like? What do the business plans look like? Staffing, building, contracts. What if one has one kind of copier and the other has another kind of copier? Do we pitch out some copiers? I mean, there's a zillion details that are all really small potatoes, but we have to work our way through that, and we're not done. It takes a long time to figure all that stuff out. So once they're all put together, we get an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. And so the details of the memorandum are drawn up by Mitch Skinner, and then ultimately it would have to be approved by your board. So the task force was created to put together the plan, and ultimately 4 boards are going to vote. And who are the 4 boards? Well, Mobile has a board of directors for the association and a separate board of directors for the MLS, which is a separate for-profit corporation. Baldwin Realtors has a board of directors, and then they have an MLS committee. So those 4 groups would all vote on the plan. And then a smaller, nimble group is empowered to do the hard work of really filling in the entire plan after the MOU. And you have to have trust and confidence in that group, because you can't have every single decision like, let's task the membership to vote on which copiers we use. I mean, that obviously you can see that level of detail is just would drive you crazy. So the 5 Rivers Task Force was created. We started right after that June 23rd meeting. The very following week, we started having weekly Zoom calls. And I have a belief that work expands to fill the allotted time. If you say we're going to be done on a certain date, you'll get it done by then. If we say it's going to be done in 2 years, it'll take 2 years. So we needed to pick a target date to approve, and that's why October. You've seen that October date out there. We were moving along pretty rapidly towards that date, and then things stopped. So there's no date right now. We're waiting to hear what you guys say on the survey. And the same with the target date to implement. Realistically, once we get going again, we probably need about 2 months to get to an MOU, maybe 2.5, and then we need probably 3 to 4 months to go to closing after that. So it's going to take some time. So the boards discussed, and then the boards vote 3 times. So first, to vote to approve exploring the merger. That vote happened, as I said, unanimous. Second vote has not happened, and that's to approve the fully developed memorandum of understanding. It's not fully developed, so that vote has not happened yet, and won't happen, as I said, probably for 8 to 10 weeks after we get going again. And then the third vote is 3 to 4 months after that, after all the legal documents are finalized and they're reviewed. And I understand that Baldwin Realtors is asking for 90 days after the after some point to review things. So that's going to be months out. And that's when the membership votes. So the survey you're getting right now is not a vote. It is just a survey to ask if we should go forward or if this thing's dead in the water. So please answer those surveys and answer honestly how you feel, because everybody wants to know how you feel, because it's all about you. It's about two groups of people, to be honest. It's about agents, number one, and it's about your clients. What's best for them? And if we're not thinking about the clients, if we're only thinking about something else, we're nuts. It's all about the people who are listing and selling real estate in Southern Alabama. So here's my my information, and I gave that, and I just wanted to say, you know, I was a broker of a company in that's been part of Home Services since 1999, Champion Realty in Maryland, and Home Services acquired Long and Foster, which was the third largest real estate company in the country, and I was in 4 counties with 7 offices, and they were surrounding me with 230 offices in 7 states, and it just made sense for my Champion agents to go and join Long and Foster. And then Home Services was looking for a role for me, and since I've been so involved in the MLS, and because since MLS is so pivotal to what we all do for a living, they decided to create this new position for me. So I do this kind of thing all over the country. I'm on NAR committees to make sure that NAR keeps doing things that's for the best, in our view, for the entire real estate industry. There's nothing to be gained by for Home Services by whether you merge or not. The gain is all based on the agents and the buying and selling public in Southern Alabama. And so we support the idea of merging, but the decisions are up to you, and how you do it is totally up to you. But all I can suggest right now is please answer those surveys, because your leadership needs to hear what you want, and so that they can either get going, or if you don't want to do it, table it, and we can all get back to work doing other things. There's been a lot of time spent on this. So if anything I can do to help any one of you, feel free to reach out for me. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, in the phone book. Call the AEs, they'll give you my cell number. I'm willing to talk to anybody about anything, anytime. So anyway, good luck with your decision, and please answer the survey. Thanks.